Welcome to a brand new series on the Innovation Show on the work of Eric von Hippel. Before we come to Eric, I wanted to thank our sponsors of this series, the kings of free innovation, open innovation, and connecting with the power of the crowd. Wazoku, they are pioneers of what they call total innovation, transforming how organizations solve challenges, drive growth, and deliver measurable results. As the world's only networked innovation marketplace, Wazoku connects people, ideas, and technology to create scalable, impactful innovation. You can discover more about Wazoku at wazoku.com. Now to our guest. He is Professor of Technological Innovation in the MIT Sloan School of Management. He specializes in research related to the nature and economics of distributed and free innovation. He also develops and teaches about practical methods that individuals, open user communities, and firms can apply to improve their innovation development processes. He is Eric von Hippel. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. I really look forward to chatting with you, and I'm glad you have an interested audience.
Me and Eric actually connected. It's almost 2 years ago now, man, since we first connected.
Yeah.
And we were planning recording something together. And we went down a rabbit hole talking about health and looking after yourself. And you have a great interest in that. And you were telling me, for those people who are watching us, you were in the gym and you actually banged your head off one of the gym equipment. So for those people watching us, that's what happened, Eric.
Yeah, exercise is dangerous. That's all I can say.
Well, it's a good sign, because you're doing work to prevent falls that could lead to bruises like that.
There
But
you
actually, there is some collateral damage from doing it. So
Yeah,
just to get that out of the way, Eric, so people know
Sure.
what's going on here.
Sure.
And it's so great to have you on the show, man. You mentioned Thomas Kuhn in the book. You mentioned paradigm shifts. You have introduced this new paradigm, and I thought that would be a great way to start. Is what is this paradigm of free innovation? It is also very closely linked to open innovation. So maybe we'll distinguish those things, get some terminology out onto the table today, and give an introduction. And then we'll be back for another part where we go a bit deeper into the work.
Sure. So free innovation, I guess I can best introduce it with a little context. Historically, ever since an economist named Schumpeter brought innovation into economics, historically, it's been the case that people say, oh yeah, producers innovate. Producers are the ones, they come to you and they look deep into your eyes and they say, oh my God, I know what you need. I'll do it and I'll make a bunch of money. And that has been, even to this day, how the innovation process is understood. So if you take, for instance, an innovation entrepreneurship course at MIT or elsewhere, it'll start with look around, find an unfilled need, and then go and patent the hell out of your solution to it and sell it and so on. In other words, the user, the consumer in all these cases is thought of as just having needs, not innovating. So this really, the beginning of this whole thing about user-centered innovation, free innovation, is that as a kid, I knew that wasn't true. I mean, I looked around and I was always inventing things. If I needed something, I sure in hell didn't write to AT&T saying, making me a new phone. I'd build a new phone. Never would occur to me that AT&T would be interested, and of course they wouldn't. So it's every kid's experience and every scientist's experience that you have to create what you need for yourself. So when I came across in graduate school, Schumpeter and so on, I just knew that was not the whole story. So how to show others it's not the whole story? Well, we did a bunch of studies where we showed that prior to producers innovating, prior to producers making, for example, center pivot irrigation, producers making skateboards, users did it. So I don't know if you know what center pivot irrigation is. You might. It's these giant things that create circles and they're irrigating crops, right? So that was a hell of a labor-saving thing. The pipes moved automatically on their own, sort of like a giant sprinkler system. but it wasn't invented by irrigation manufacturers. It was some farmer who said, damn it, I'm really tired of lugging all this pipe around. I'm going to build it. And then built it out of scrap materials. Now, then what happens is manufacturers say, there's no market in that. If there were, we would have thought of it. And so then it sits there, the user does it, but then other farmers around him begin to copy it. And eventually what happens is the manufacturer says, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. And then it was so funny. They often pick up the user prototype and they improve it in various ways, make it more reliable and stuff. And then they claim to have invented it. They say, oh, yeah, well, that user, yeah, something, pile of pipes. No, we did the brilliant thing by our XYZ. Now, in case of consumer goods, this is even more the case. Who do you think came up with a skateboard? It wasn't Mattel or a manufacturer who said, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll put wheels under a board, no steering wheel, send kids down the hill, and hide from my liability insurance guy. No, it was kids who did it. And other kids made copies. And manufacturers thought, this is the worst idea in the world. How is this possible? And furthermore, we're selling 1 million bikes a year, and there are 200 users of skateboards. Forget it. So what happens is evidence of market need builds, but the evidence of market need builds because there is a solution out there that users developed and that others can observe. And this is true in every field, consumer, medical, everything. Now, that changes how we think about the innovation process. And what makes me really happy about it is it empowers us all. We're all there. We're saying, no, we don't have to wait around for some manufacturer to notice we need something. We can build it. And it's fun. And it's exciting. And that's the way the world works.
So brilliant setup for us. And oh man, as you know, I have tons of notes here, and I'm actually thinking of going, it's like one of those speeches and they tear up the speech and go, you know what, I'm going to speak from the heart. And I think we'll just go off script because you've set us up so beautifully. And I'd love to just share a few examples of this. So on recent shows, for example, I'll throw some out at you and I'd love you to just riff on them, and maybe you can bring it somewhere else and to your own work and your own research, your own examples.
Sure.
One of them recently was Hire, the white good manufacturer, brilliant company. And I heard about this where they had observed that farmers were using their washing machines to wash potatoes.
Yeah.
And then they actually were like going, you know what, instead of actually getting on those crazy farmers, they're like, well, actually, let's create one for washing potatoes. And what I'm getting at here is that there is a benefit also as a company from the other side of innovation, the non-free side, the Schumpeterian paradigm.
Yeah.
To actually go, well, if I observe here or I work with the free innovators, I can actually create something that's needed in the economy.
Absolutely right. And instead of somebody saying, oh, I think I need a potato washer, but then once Hire makes it, deciding, no, I don't want one, the fact that it's needed is demonstrated because people are doing it. And by the way, I know the folks at Hire, and in the GE version of it in the US, and they're part of my innovation lab, and they now have systematized what you're talking about. So one of the things they did, it's so cool, is they started talking to their employees who were from different cultures than the standard US one, and trying to see what they did with their washing machines. Now, people of Hispanic background, it turned out, felt that the clothing had to soak. And the machine didn't have a soak cycle. So what they would do is open the lid and leave it open for half an hour. That would stop the machine. So they invented their own soak cycle. Now, the parents of these employees often didn't speak English, so they couldn't read the labels on this damn thing. Right? So fabulous. The people in the household would say, oh, okay, here's a sticky note, do this. And so again, the whole idea of these instructions we have in English don't mean a damn thing to 30% of our audience. And so again, but it's not, oh, I'm sitting here and have a need. It's I'm demonstrating I have a need because I'm changing your machine. I'm customizing it for my family, myself. And that's how it goes. And that's the new method that we're teaching.
One of the things I wanted to share with you, the sponsor of the innovation show, of particularly the concept of open innovation or connected innovation, where you're actually engaging the audience, is a company, Innocentive. And
Sure.
Innocentive was acquired by Wazoku, who's our sponsor.
Ah,
And they acquired every one of these kind of platforms for engaging with the crowd and the
yeah.
crowd producing ideas, etc. I'd love for you to share your view of that and what you have seen, because when you have a platform like that to engage, kind of like Hire have done, you can have open platforms like this where you reward these free innovators. So there's some skin in the game for them.
Yes. So crowdsourcing and so on. And God, I've been around a while. So I also helped at the start of an incentive. So funny. Yeah. But there's now a new way to go about this. So when you have a crowd, you have to somehow invest in bringing them in. You don't bring in everybody. You have to filter through what they did. Now we do something different. What we do is we say, look, all these people are talking to each other. The people who, make racing bicycles and improve them, they're talking to each other. There's surgeons who make a better heart-lung machine. They're talking to each other. Let's go on the web. Let's find people who say, I had a problem and I solved it. And then as a separate analysis, let's find those things that are building a lot of chatter around it. And I adopted it. And wow, it's true, So what we used to have to say in terms of skateboards, it was the kids in California or wherever they were, you had to be a direct observer. Now, because of AI and the web, you can identify these things in 15 minutes and categorize them and say, what do you want to explore further? Because then, of course, you want to explore further.
One of the things I thought was really important to share is the characteristics of a free innovator and how self-reward is often the reward from an altruistic perspective. But also, a little bit of that can be, we've all had ideas where we've had the idea and we've taken no action. And then that idea manifests in the real world several years later, and you'll go, I had that idea 5 years ago. Most of us have done that. But there's a little bit of in us, the lack of, well, I couldn't be asked, being the one who goes and makes this happen, gets funding and brings it to life, but I'll hack together some prototype, no problem, in my garage, that type of idea. But also then there's the real altruistic thing. And one of the great heroes of this, I thought, was Jonas Salk and his polio vaccine. And when he was asked about it, are you going to patent this thing? He's like, you can't patent this thing. The world owns it. And I thought that was a nice way to set up the characteristics of these free innovators.
Yeah. It's a really interesting point you raise. And the thing is, it's not just altruism. In other words, what we find is that a user innovates because he needs it or she needs it, right? They are rewarded by using it. That farmer who built the first center pivot irrigation system, he wasn't doing it so others could eventually benefit. He needed it today. That kid who built a skateboard, he needed it. He wasn't thinking of selling something. And so what you find often is that sometimes these kids become entrepreneurs, for example, or the surgeon does or whatever. But very often they don't, because they have satisfied their own problem. Give you an example. I had a personal example. I had a tendon that was inflamed, and so went to the surgeon. The surgeon said, well, what you have to do is you have to wear this damn ski boot. You've seen those kinds of things, right?
Wore them too many times, man.
Yeah. And so I'm saying, well, you know, I can't even get around in this goddamn thing, right? I mean, the ankle doesn't bend and all the rest of this. And he says, yeah, too bad. Some of my clients, oh, they're amazing. They play basketball in it. And I'm like, yeah. So anyway, I went home and I sort of looked and I saw that the tendon that I wanted to protect from motion was not affected if I put in an ankle joint in this thing. So then I could walk around much better. So I chopped up the boot and put in a joint and then was able to walk around much more effectively, right? So solve my own need. Now here's the thing. I went into the surgeon then and I said, hey, you could have this, for God's sakes. It's a lot better than the stuff that you're handing out in the supply room there. He said, well, you know what, Eric? I'd have to go through the FDA. Why don't you go through the FDA for me? And I'm like, no, I've got other stuff to do. This is not my main job, you know? And so for that reason, you can have, your wish to do something, you solve it for yourself, but then you don't necessarily want to commercialize it. If you hand it on, that's a form of altruism, yes. But on the other hand, it costs a bunch of money to protect something. Why would you do that? So you hand it on, and then somebody else who wants to be an entrepreneur can pick it up.
And a really important aspect to build on that is the importance of diffusion.
Yeah.
And as you say, the paradigm has actually even changed once again in a digital realm where you can actually diffuse very, very quickly,
Yes.
particularly if it's a 3D design or
Yeah.
it's a software. Apache is an example you give.
Yeah. This is fabulous. And in fact, we're studying in China now how this really goes very quickly. They have tea tables over there. Everybody has a factory. You bring something in, they just make it and they see if the market wants it. And they just do this very cheaply. And yeah, so the diffusion thing is getting solved, but because of the low costs. But again, it's not necessarily the person who does it for their own need who also wants to do that. And that opens an opportunity for entrepreneurs and companies because they can say, hey, just like the hire example, hey, that lady is not going to patent the idea of opening the lid of the washer to pause wash. She just wants it done. We can do that. And it fits their commercial interest and her use interest.
There's a great example where the gentleman who commercialized Red Bull was in a taxi in Thailand and noticed the taxi drivers are drinking this thing to keep them awake, to keep them more alert. And it's an example of the entrepreneur willing to go drop their job and go and develop these things.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because when you wrote this book, Free Innovation, and I'm going to share a link for those who haven't seen it already. I'm sharing links to Eric. He is the king of this. I'll link to Eric's site where you can find all his articles, all his work, but also he is kind enough to give away PDFs of this book as well, where you can download, and indeed other variations of digital downloads. But in the book, you say, in just 6 countries that you had surveyed at the time, tens of millions of individuals in household sectors had been found to collectively spend tens of billions of dollars in time and materials, their own money per year, developing products for their own use. And over 90% of them met both the criteria of defining free innovation in that they developed their innovations during unpaid discretionary time, and they did not protect the designs they developed from adoption by others for free.
Yeah.
This is a really important aspect I'd love you to riff on.
Yeah. Again, you raise a very good point. The thing is, we always assume because it's producer-centered, producers make money by protecting something and getting a monopoly on it, right? That's why entrepreneurship courses say, oh, if you want to commercialize something, try to protect it so that you are the entrepreneur. But the world of users is not driven that way. The world of users is driven by, I need it. Now, some of the people, about 5% or so, will say, oh, okay, now I did this thing and I'm going to go ahead and make a company. And interestingly enough, this has to do with opportunity costs. When we studied scientists, for example, they never started a scientific instrument company. But in sports equipment, where these kids are young, they don't have a job anyway, they want to sell surfboards to make beer money, there they often flow into an entrepreneurial job.
I was using the Red Bull example to go, this is an entrepreneur who goes, I'm going to go after this. He may then, or she, first put all their own time into it, then get funding. But then there's the free innovators who actually do this in their own time at nighttime in their shed. So, and one of the things I would love you to talk about is we hear about the 20% time in places like 3M or Google talk about it, for example. And I thought about, well, a company can also unlock free innovators in their own company. And companies like Hire, for example, where they actually make them co-owners of the idea they come up with and they fast track them, they give them distribution, etc. What's your view on that? Because that has changed quite a bit in organizations over the last time, for good and for bad.
Yeah. So specifically with respect to sort of free time and getting your own innovators, the issue is that, oh, and by the way, one other thing related to your Red Bull example. Very often the entrepreneurs don't credit or give anything back to the innovator. Like the Red Bull guy did probably not seek out that Thai taxi driver again and say, hey, here,
I often think about it. If somebody gave you the winning lotto ticket for your birthday, would you give them some of the money back? Or that famous movie with Nicolas Cage where he was a cop and he didn't have money for a tip. It was with Bridget Fonda, and he went back, he found her, and he gave her like $1 million because he won the lottery.
Right.
But that never happens in real life.
Well, it does when some companies start to, and this will relate to your point, when some companies say, oh, we now understand that we get ideas from users, they often will figure out a form of reward for the community. So, for instance, Lego gets a lot of designs from their users. But the reason the users come up with these is sort of community action. So that if you just took one person and said, here, we're going to give you 3% of sales or something, you'd wreck the community. So what they do is they give community rewards, like they give people tons of Legos and sponsor, sort of events to encourage the activity and also to give back. So there are many ways to give back besides sort of contractual. Most people don't do it. They just sort of grab the idea and then pretend it was theirs. But now back to the 20% time zone. The thing is that the really good user innovations come from a combination of circumstances that a company can't predict. So that if you restrict yourself to a few lead users inside your own company, you're unlikely to get the best stuff. Let me give you an illustration. You probably know about this. You know the Camelback thing, the water thing?
I used to have one. Yeah, my wife threw it out. She's like, "You never use this thing." And I will one day. It was in the attic, and she got rid of it. She's one of those Marie Kondo minimalists, so she got rid of it.
Yeah. So this guy, Edson, I think was his name, Edson. He was a bike racer, long distance bike racer in Texas in the summer. So there was a real need for hydration. In those days, as you know, probably, you had a bracket and you had a little water bottle on the front bracket, and you'd have to break position, reach down, grab the damn bottle, drink from it, and then get it back into that location and pedal on. Now, everybody had that problem. Nobody thought about it. But this guy was also an emergency medical technician. And he brought his truck to the race. And he was used to hydrating people who had heat stroke. So he went to his truck where he had bags of liquid and he had surgical tubing. He pinned the bag to the back of his shirt, right? Now, here's the point. he might never invent anything else in his life. If you had a bunch of bike riders in a company, the company amongst those people might well not come up with that, because the combination is 1 in a million. So yes, it's a great idea to encourage your workers and stuff like that. But really what you need is an outside search technique. You need a method to see everything that's going on out there and saying, whoa, that one's gaining speed, right? So that's what I suggest. The company as innovator, it was in your case of Red Bull, right? What an odd example that there was a guy drinking this stuff in Thailand and an entrepreneur in his cab who recognized that. Now, if you were a company, you could have a hell of a lot of people in there taking taxis and they'd never come across it, right? So that's why you sort of have to scan the world. And that's why things like innovative that draw on a specific crowd aren't as good as the new, sort of large language model methods we have to search the entire web for signs of what's going on.
There's a really important nugget in there, and I fear that it will be missed from many people who read books. Often skip the introduction. And so I find sometimes in the introduction, there's a nugget in there that doesn't then reappear elsewhere in the book. Like the introduction isn't just, here's what's coming in the book. There's often a nugget, a piece in there that doesn't appear. And I'd love you to describe this one. You were talking about the idea of the paradigm, and paradigm is a Greek word that means pattern. So the pattern of thinking.
Yep.
And if the pattern of thinking in an organization is, we need to have some type of innovation method to go after commercial opportunities, that means that focus leads to inattentional blindness of other opportunities.
That's right.
And this is the piece I'd love you to describe as a parting nugget for our audience today.
Sure.
If there's anything else you get, it's this, because this happens time and time again, where they have great intentions of being more innovative, but their structures and the systems they have in place actually alienate ideas from being seen in the first place.
Yep, these are very good points. So absolutely, based on the Schumpeterian idea that you find a need and fill it, almost every company in this and every other known universe has set up a system for sensing needs. They have marketing research going out there saying, oh, what do you need? And people say things like, well, those blueberry muffins you make, I'd like a few more blueberries in them, right? Say, okay, we can do that. Now, meanwhile, the big innovations, because we were talking earlier before the show about Clayton Christensen, the disruptive innovations, more than half of them come from user innovators like that guy with the backpack we just talked about. So what happens? The present system, as you said, is absolutely blind to the things on the margins that are growing, the leading edge. They want the center. They want to know if you want a few more blueberries in the muffin, right? So how do ideas actually get in that are good? They often go around the system. So I'll give an example. We were studying scientific instrument companies. Scientific instrument companies had these things where they had staff to sell them and they had marketing research and all the rest of this. And the guy on the top says, well, yeah, we got a system, it works like the Schumpeterian thing, standard thing, and we're getting new products. So we went behind to say, well, where actually are these new products coming from? And where they were coming from was field service technicians who were the ones going out to all the professors using the instruments. The professors had hacked the instruments. The field service guys came back to R&D and said, hey, look at this. Look at what this guy did. And the manufacturers did it, and then the system took credit. Like, yeah, I guess we must have marketing research that's working. No. So many of these people, if they look at where their innovations really come from, it's not the standard machinery. And that is the struggle that I and many other people have gone through because companies just can't change. They just can't change. Sometimes you get a company, typically in the digital area, that'll figure it out and do it. But most companies, they just say, well, this is what we do. I've gone out and demonstrated the method because I want to spread it, right? Demonstrated the method. Companies like, Nestle and 3M and so on, big companies, demonstrated the method. Wow, look what happens. We get, a really good thing out of this. Then what happens? Well, I leave thinking, oh, good, now they'll take this up. And then they don't. And I go back and I say, well, you got yourself a 10x improvement here. How come you didn't do it again? And they'll say, well, listen, I'm in marketing research. And the way I'm judged is on my budget. What you did cost them $100,000. I can put together a focus group and come up with an idea for $5,000. By the time that idea actually gets out there, nobody will remember that I was the source. Right? So, hey, I'm not doing that, even if it's better for the company, because I've got my niche, I've got my metrics, forget it.
There's an old proverb. It's like society advances when men plant trees under whose shade they'll never sit. I love it from an innovation perspective because that exact point. Take a football coach. I'm a football coach. Why would I invest heavily in the academy and in an under 10 player?
Yeah.
Because I won't be coached when that person actually becomes this next star. If they become the next star.
Yeah.
And it's that challenge is an absolute killer in innovation. There's a piece I can't let go of that you talked about. There's a quote, I don't know, a great innovator, Buckminster Fuller, who you know well.
Oh, I know him. Yeah, or knew him.
And he had a great line. He said, all human advances happen in the outlaw area, he called it, or the outlaw zone, something like that. And what I thought about, actually came to mind recently, one of my roles is I'm a college professor and I was correcting essays. You know that task of correcting essays?
Yeah.
I just finished actually yesterday.
Wow.
Exhausted. But I actually changed my own lens of that. I used to see it as this pain. And now I see it as a source of kind of like open innovation, free innovation, of people bringing sources of information. So I read them actually with a tabla rasa and treat them with humility and read them properly. And one of the things that came up, and it was written by a lot of students are from like Korea, China, and they wrote a lot about deep fake, the whole idea of deep fake with artificial intelligence, where I could clone you and get you to say something that wasn't you. And they were saying that in their societies, deep fakes are a huge problem with pornography, where they're taking stars, but also now in some countries they can take a lady's picture off the internet and create a deep fake of her and actually can ruin their lives. And I thought about how, well, that was similar what happened in the digital age with things like YouTube and all the advances we see on technology like we're using here. Actually, a lot of it came from the pornography industry because they were the ones who pioneered a lot of this software and were, well, people want to be able to scroll through the videos or be able to jump ahead and things like this. So I thought it's a slightly sensitive area, but that really highlights the area where you're looking at those edges. And sometimes those edges are not black or white.
Yeah. I mean, with respect to your grading of essays and so on, and talking about planting a tree you'll never live under, I mean, you have a good heart. That's really nice. And it's nice to know. And it's true that, I've emphasized the idea that people develop things because they want to use them for their own benefit. And there's advantages to that because they can try them out in a real environment and see if they work or not and tell their friends. But there are people who are altruistic. Like, I don't know if you know, but there's a system now where if there's a earthquake or whatever and people are buried under their houses and they have phones that work, some of them. And so they can call in where they are. Well, some altruistic open source folks in New York came up with a system for collecting this stuff and feeding it back to local citizens. And they did that not because they were in this mess, but because they wanted to help. There are lots of examples of that too. I'll tell you a really cool one, which I love. It's called the Enable project. It's fabulous. So kids sometimes are born without hands. There's some sort of a thing something in the uterus that somehow something gets wrapped around where the hand should be. It doesn't develop. And so there are quite a few of these kids, and they get teased, and it's terrible. And to get a myoelectric hand, it's a $10,000 gadget. The kid keeps growing. If the kid puts it in water, as a kid will, the thing is fried. It's just a totally impractical solution. So what happened was, with the evolution of 3D printers, some guy who had a neighbor kid who had this problem built a plastic hand that could be manipulated, and it cost like less than $5 worth of material. He open sourced the design. And so around the world now, there's a network of people making free hands for kids. And these hands, it's so cool. These hands, they're not this ugly medical looking thing. They're sort of like a Transformers hand, or, one of those things. And you can get it in the colors you want, whether it's pink or whatever the hell it is. And it looks really cool. And so the story I really loved was because this kid was being teased, by his, kids in third grade and so on can be cruel. And he was being teased, and he was really sad about it. And then he went to school with this thing. And some other kid went home to his mother and said, "Listen, I want what Jimmy has. Can't you just cut off my hand and I can get one?" And his mother refused. But the spirit was there.
Brilliant. I heard just on that, I heard this beautiful story where a poor kid had cancer and lost their hair through chemotherapy.
Yeah.
And in solidarity, the teacher shaved her head.
Oh, that's
And then
lovely.
the next day, loads of the kids came in and they had shaved their heads as well.
Oh,
And I thought it was just beautiful, wasn't it?
that's
Beautiful.
lovely. That's
Yeah,
absolutely
that's a good heart. Yeah.
absolutely a good heart.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's the story. So you
Beautiful.
also wanted to know the difference between open innovation and the kind of stuff I'm calling free innovation?
Let's get that in, and then hopefully we'll come back together again. Eric, just to explain to our audience, he's going to tee us up and introduce us to some other open innovators, free innovators, people who have done amazing work. And we had initially planned to go chapter by chapter through the book, but Eric had a better idea. And being the open innovator I am, I listened to him.
Yeah.
So we're going to co-create this, and Eric will be behind pulling the strings, and I'll be doing the executing on the front end. And I will be giving him the credit as well. Don't worry about that.
No need.
But yeah, let's finish on that. And then what we're going to do is come back the next day. For those of you who are reading along, there's a figure 1.1 in the book, and it shows the difference between the open paradigm and the Schumpeterian paradigm. We are going to cover that. We're going to cover that briefly in episode 2, and then we're going to go where the wind takes us in the future. But let's finish on this idea of open versus free.
So the thing is that the term open, Henry Chesbrough came up with that, and people were, interested in it, sort of galvanized interest and attention, and that was good. But it mixed up things because basically it said, there you can buy, sell, exchange, IP and so on was where that started. And it wasn't really about user innovation more narrowly. So users innovate. That's the big focus of what I'm doing because it turns out to be huge and against the standard wisdom. But it's narrower than open, because open these days can mean almost anything. So just to focus in, users innovate for their own uses. They often give it away free, which makes free innovation, because they've solved their own need and they don't intend to produce. And that pattern is quite unique to the idea of user and open free innovation.
Beautiful. Absolutely. From the man himself, the pioneer of free innovation. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really, really grateful for your time. I'm
Delighted.
delighted how we've co-created this and where we'll go in the future as well. Last question for you, Eric, is where can people find your materials?
I have an MIT website, which has all sorts of downloadable free materials, and see what you think.
Absolute pleasure talking to you. Eric von Hippel, thank you for joining us.
Delighted, Aidan.